Buy a new car. The female CEO was told then. A single dad opened the hood and shocked everyone. Marissa Cole had built an empire out of stubbornness. At 38, she was the CEO of Cole Dynamics, a logistics tech company that had gone from a two-room office in Austin to a firm valued at $400 million. She wore tailored blazers like armor, kept her hair cut sharp at the shoulder, and had a reputation in 3 states for never repeating herself in a meeting. People who worked for her respected her. People who didn't know her feared her. Almost no one saw the version of her that existed outside the boardroom. The version that every Sunday morning drove out to a small mechanic's garage on the edge of town in a car that had absolutely no business still running. The car was a 1969 Porsche 911. Silver dented once on the rear quarter panel, smelling faintly of old leather and engine oil. It had belonged to her father, Daniel Cole, a machinist, who had died 4 years earlier and left her exactly 2 things: the company's seed money that became Cole Dynamics, and this car. She had been offered absurd amounts of money for it. Collectors flew in from Los Angeles and Miami just to look at it in her garage. She always said no. It wasn't for sale, wasn't for show, wasn't a symbol. It was the last place her father's hands had been. That morning, the car wouldn't start. She'd taken it to 3 shops already. The first, a franchise place downtown, quoted her $12,000 for a full engine rebuild. She was fairly sure it didn't need. The second shop's manager had looked at her Rolex, looked at the car, and told her flatly, "Ma'am, parts for this thing don't exist anymore. Buy something new, a Tesla, maybe. Something that won't leave you stranded." The third shop wouldn't even take the job. Too old, too rare, too much liability. It was her assistant Priya who found the 4th place. A garage on Route 9 with a hand-painted sign that read Bennett's Auto Fixed Right every time. No website. 47 reviews online. Every single one 5 stars. One review in particular caught Priya's eye. "Grout in my dad's old Mustang." Everyone said it was dead. Guy fixed it in an afternoon and didn't charge me for half the labor because he said he enjoyed the puzzle. Marissa drove the Porsche in on a flatbed, arms crossed, already skeptical. The man who came out to meet the tow truck was younger than she expected. Maybe 32, 33. Broad shoulders, deep brown skin flecked with grease. A canvas apron, worn soft from years of use. His name, stitched crooked onto the apron pocket, read Marcus. "You must be the 11 o'clock, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. Marcus Bennett, Marissa Cole. She didn't offer a handshake. His hands were black with oil, and some old habit in her respected that too much to force it. "It won't turn over. 3 shops already told me it's not worth fixing." Marcus glanced past her at the car, and something changed in his face. Not excitement, exactly, more like recognition, like meeting someone he'd read about. "That's a 69 911, he said. "Long hood. Numbers matching. If I had to guess by the shape of that badge." He crouched by the front fender without asking permission, running 2 fingers along a seam in the metal, like he was reading Braille. "Whoever told you this wasn't worth fixing doesn't know what they're looking at." "That's what I thought," Marissa said. "But I've heard that sentence from people who then hand me an invoice for parts I could have bought a second car with. I don't do that here." He straightened up. "Give me 20 minutes with the hood open before you decide anything. No charge for looking." She almost said no. She had a board call at 1. But there was something in the way he touched the car, careful, unhurried, like it mattered to him for its own sake, and not for what she could pay, that made her fold her arms and lean against the garage doorway instead. 20 minutes, she said. What she didn't know yet was that Marcus Bennett had grown up 2 counties over, in a house where money showed up like weather. Sometimes there, mostly not. His mother worked 2 jobs. His father wasn't around. What kept food on the table some years was an uncle who ran a backyard repair operation out of a rented garage bay, fixing cars for neighbors who couldn't afford dealership prices. Marcus started sweeping floors there at 11. By 16, he could rebuild a carburetor blindfolded. He never went to college. There wasn't money for it. And by the time there might have been, his daughter Zoe was born, and college became someone else's plan for someone else's life. He raised Zoe alone starting when she was 4. After her mother left, for reasons Marcus never discussed with customers, and rarely discussed with anyone, he'd bought this garage 6 years ago, with a loan he was still paying off. On a corner of Route 9, nobody thought would draw business. It drew business anyway. Slowly. Because Marcus Bennett had a gift that couldn't be taught in a certification course. He listened to engines the way other people listened to music. He heard what was wrong before he saw it. Right now, hood up, flashlight in his teeth. He was listening to the silence of a car that wouldn't even try to start, and he already had 3 theories, and was fairly sure only one of them was right. "It's not the engine," he said. 20 minutes later, exactly on time. Marissa had spent those 20 minutes watching from the doorway. Phone buzzing twice with calls, she'd let go to voicemail something she never did. "They told me it needed a full rebuild," she said. "Whoever told you that either didn't check or wanted to sell you a $12,000 job." Marcus stood up, grease on his forearms now too. "It's your starter relay. Little component, maybe $40. Somebody at some point rewired part of your ignition system, not factory, an aftermarket fix, probably from the 70s. And it's finally corroded through. Your engine's actually in remarkable shape for its age. Somebody who knew what they were doing built this motor to last." Marissa went very still. "My father rebuilt that engine," she said quietly. "In 1981. He was a machinist. He used to say he built it to outlive him." Marcus looked at her for a second, too long. Then nodded slowly, like a piece of information had just clicked into a much bigger picture. "Well," he said, "he did his job right. It's outliving 3 mechanics who told you it was already dead." For the first time in longer than she could remember, Marissa Cole laughed a real laugh. Not the practiced one she used to close meetings. He fixed the relay in under an hour. Refused to let her pay for the diagnostic. When she pushed a $100 bill at him anyway, he pushed it back. "Buy your kid something instead," he said, without thinking, and then caught himself. "Sorry, I don't actually know if you have kids. I don't." Marissa said. "You do. 1. Zoe. She's 8. Something in his face softened completely when he said her name, the same unhurried care he'd shown the car. "Aim now at a person. She's at my sister's this weekend. First 1 inch is a while I've had off. And you spent it fixing a stranger's dead car for free." "Wasn't dead," Marcus said. "Just needed somebody to actually look at it instead of looking at the invoice." Marissa didn't leave right away. She stayed another 20 minutes, sitting on an overturned crate while Marcus closed up, asking questions she hadn't planned to ask about the garage, about Zoe, about why a man with his hands could rebuild an engine like a surgeon, and still charge less than a fast food combo meal for a diagnostic that saved her $12,000. "Because the second I start treating people like a bill instead of a person," Marcus said, "I turn into every other place that told you to scrap your dad's car." She thought about that sentence the whole drive home. 2 weeks later, Marcus Bennett got a phone call. He almost didn't answer, because the number wasn't saved, and he was elbow deep in a transmission. It was Marissa, not calling about the car this time. Cole Dynamics, it turned out, had a fleet division, 340 delivery vehicles across 6 states, all serviced through a rotating cast of overpriced regional contractors who'd been quietly bleeding the company for years through inflated parts costs and unnecessary repairs. Marissa had pulled the numbers after her Sunday at Bennett's Auto, unable to stop thinking about the gap between what 4 different mechanics had told her about the exact same car. "I want to bring you in as a consultant," she said. "Audit our fleet maintenance contracts. Tell me who's Marcus Bennett, and who's the guy who wanted $12,000 for a $40 part." Marcus laughed. Assuming she was joking, she wasn't. It took him 3 days to say yes, not because of the money, though the number she offered would have paid off his garage loan twice over, but because he didn't know how to be anything other than a mechanic with grease under his nails. And he was afraid of a boardroom, the way some people are afraid of heights. "You don't need to be anything other than what you are," Marissa told him, in a call that went on far longer than either of them expected. "That's the entire point. I've spent 2 years surrounded by people whose job is to sound convincing. I need someone whose job is to actually be right." The audit took 4 months. It uncovered $11 million in inflated maintenance contracts across the fleet vendors, who, like the second shop that told Marissa to buy a Tesla, had been counting on nobody in the room knowing enough to push back. Marcus didn't do it alone. He brought in 2 mechanics he trusted, both people who, like him, had learned their trade in garages instead of classrooms, and had spent their whole careers being underestimated for it. By the time the final report reached the board, Marissa had a decision to make that had nothing to do with cars at all. Cole Dynamics needed a permanent director of fleet operations, someone to keep the vendors honest going forward, someone the mechanics on the ground would actually trust. Half the board assumed she'd hire from within. Some executive with an MBA and a LinkedIn full of buzzwords. She hired Marcus instead. He kept the garage, refused to give it up, and she never asked him to. Route 9 still had the hand-painted sign, still smelled like oil and rubber, still had Saturdays where he fixed a neighbor's Mustang for the joy of the puzzle. But 3 days a week now, he sat in a glass-walled office at Cole Dynamics headquarters, in jeans instead of a suit, because Marissa told the board that if they wanted someone who could smell a bad repair from across a garage, they didn't get to dress, code the smell of honest work out of him. Zoe visited the office once, not long after, wide-eyed at the size of the building, asking her dad in a whisper if he was rich now. Marcus crouched down to her level, the same unhurried way he'd once crouched by a dented fender. "No, baby," he said. "I'm just finally somewhere that pays attention when I know what I'm talking about." Marissa watched that exchange from across the lobby and thought, not for the first time, about her father, about a man who'd built an engine to outlive him, in a garage not so different from the one on Route 9. Believing that quality eventually gets noticed if it survives long enough for the right person to look under the hood. The Porsche still runs. Every other Sunday, Marissa drives it out to Bennett's Auto, not because it needs fixing anymore, but because some habits, once they save your life a little, are worth keeping. Sometimes Zoe rides along in the passenger seatbelt too big for her, asking 100 questions about engines that Marissa is slowly learning the answers to herself. The people who told her to scrap the car and buy something new never learn what happened to it. They don't need to. Some of the most expensive lessons in business Marissa has learned aren't taught in a boardroom at all. They're taught by a man in a grease-stained apron on a quiet Sunday morning who looked at what everyone else had already given up on and simply refused to agree. The end.